Good morning. It is 10:29 a.m. on Sunday, February 9th, 2020. I am Christiana Ellis. I've been up for a little bit. This is 5 more minutes. I'm anxious because it's the last day of my vacation time before I have to go back to work tomorrow and start that whole new routine with the little puppy, but it'll be fine. It will, I promise. I hope. But it's Sunday today, which means I'm continuing my rewatch of Cowboy Bebop with Session 19, Wild Horses. This is another episode that doesn't really tie into anything in particular. Like, we get a teeny bit of Spike backstory, not really his main story, but just kind of, oh, hey, here's a guy that Spike knows. We learn a little bit about why he has his ship, the Swordfish, and um, and we just get some fun action, right? Like, it's not a dense episode. It's just got some good fun stuff in it, playing around with some silly ideas. We begin the episode with Jet and Ed and Faye on a fishing expedition where they're trying to catch some pirates by posing as an adrift vulnerable ship. In the meantime, they're complaining about, like, hey, why is Spike not here? Why did he not reply back? And we know it's because he crash landed. He was already taking his ship to get serviced, and it was just slower because, he had to wait for a tow, essentially. But we have Spike, waiting by his ship, staying under the shade, under, sort of harsh desert landscape. But it's great because as he does get, towed, he's waiting for his buddy Duhan. Which is, as a spaceship engineer, is obviously a reference to James Doohan, who played Scotty on Star Trek. But instead of Doohan picking him up, it is Miles, who's a young man who is an extreme and enthusiastic baseball fan of the team, the Blue Sox. And it's kind of delightful that in picking Spike up and towing his ship back, he just goes on and on about baseball the whole ride back, and it's like made a point that Spike is just like he's having a hard time dealing with all this baseball talk. He does not care, but that doesn't deter Miles. He's an enthusiastic fella apprenticing to Duhan, and so eventually they get back, and the whole workshop there is very reminiscent and designed to invoke the, old Southwest, airstrip, airplane mechanic sort of setups. And there's a lot of really fun, um, uh, you know, uh, just flavor there. It feels a little bit like, parts of the right stuff, the test pilot areas. We see that Duhan is working on some old derelict ship, which I think actually, even before we get the full reveal, the nose that sticks out the end of the building is pretty distinctive. But there's, clearly history there. We see Miles just commenting on the broken down nature of Spike's ship, but Doohan takes that really personally and gets mad. And so, but Spike saying, like, oh, you're going to chase off another assistant, again, just indicates that, like, they've known each other for a while. But just discussing the Swordfish and its special needs as a ship, like, it uses a lot of special, really rare parts. But it seems, Doohan basically emphasizes that, like, he's just trying to make a point, and that's kind of what Swordfish is about. It's I guess it's the idea seems to be you just want to make the best chip, not necessarily a practical one, but like the one that can go the fastest and maneuver the hardest and so on. And that the idea of giving that he wanted to make that ship and that he gave it to Spike. There's some nice between the lines implications of the storytelling between them that's fun. In the meantime, these pirates that everybody else are after prove a little wilier than they expected. They have this little harpoon that can inject a computer virus into the ship of whatever they spear with it, and they disable both the Bebop and Faye's little fighter, and manage to escape. And so everyone else is struggling with that for a while. And it's interesting because the three pirates there are named George, Herman, and Ruth, which is a baseball pun because George Herman Ruth is the full name of Babe Ruth. And so having baseball on the radio just kind of undercutting a lot, playing underneath a lot of the other stuff going on, and just there's a nice sort of leisurely feel, time stretching out. Feel of the stuff down on the airstrip while everyone else is kind of struggling to figure out how to deal with these pirates. But then, we catch the ship gets fixed. Spike's brought back out to try to catch up. They realize they have a lead because the ship that brought the rare parts for the swordfish is the same kind of ship, sort of a delivery truck, that the pirates had used. So they think they have a lead to follow that. But there's this bit where they come across this big station and there are two identical trucks with the same sort of purple penguin logo on it. And Spike and Faye immediately say, well, we'll just shoot and see which one of them runs. Because, whichever one's real, the pirates will run. And presumably Jet's immediately like, but what if they're both real? And also it kind of totally ignores the idea that even a real delivery truck might flee if someone was shooting at it. It's such a weird, spur of the moment plan based only on I'm impatient. And it's kind of funny that they try it. And sure enough, both trucks run. Faye goes after one, and it turns out that it is a real delivery truck. That they just thought that she was after their parking ticket fees. Meanwhile, Spike is chasing after the real pirates. They have their own plans. They're trying to defend against this virus. There had been a secret plan put together by Jet that they disable the higher functions of their ship computer to not be immobilized when the virus hits. But it means, doing a lot of manual operation, which we recall in an earlier episode, Spike has some skill with, but it's certainly still difficult. And so there's, some fighting back and forth. The Bebop gets immobilized again. Spike is still kind of chasing after them. But eventually, the pirate's ship just explodes. So once again, no bounty for for the Bebop. But there's this moment where Spike realizes that he's out of fuel and currently plummeting into the Earth's atmosphere. And the Bebop, it hasn't recovered from the virus yet, and so it won't be able to get to him in time. And so there's this moment where it seems as though there's no hope. Spike's just going to go down. And, he's very at peace with it, which is not really all that surprising, really. I mean, we've known he's kind of got a very fatalistic attitude about these things already. But he just says, whatever happens, happens. But as they're talking back and forth, he mentions, there's whiskey behind the refrigerator. But that's when Miles, who had been listening to the baseball, and it's actually a nice little bit of writing, plotting that the radio communications, because their normal ship communications would be down from the virus, they had set up using an old school transmitter so they could still stay in communication, which meant that their communications were interfering with the baseball game that Miles was listening to. So Miles hears them talking about how it's going bad and Spike's in trouble. And so then, of course, we get this great sequence where Doohan and Miles together break out this old derelict ship that Doohan's been working on, which is, of course, the Space Shuttle Columbia. And we see them how they've retrofitted it to be able to have it take off, at like a plane would instead of, the standard way that the space shuttle did. And it's a little sad knowing as you rewatch that like the real shuttle Columbia obviously was destroyed in an accident. And so that's a little bit bittersweet, but it's fun seeing it again there. And so it's just this exciting bit where we get a lot of spaceship action of them, like trying to help Spike maneuver into the payload bay for the space shuttle so they can save him, only to then realize that they're having their own problems landing, and we actually don't even see them successfully solve those problems. All we get is that we cut back to the bulletin board down at the airstrip where we see all of these little snapshots have a new one added that shows the crashed space shuttle with Spike, Doohan, and Miles sort of posing in front of it. And so it's not a long, complex episode. It has just a lot of space action to fill up the time, but it's exciting and it's fun. It's got a lot of flavor that's enjoyable. So that's pretty much it. But next time, we're going to be talking about session 20, Pirole le Fou. And boy, that's a memorable episode with a scary, scary bad guy. But we'll talk about that next week. And in the meantime, I'll talk to you tomorrow for 5 more minutes.